Hello, for this assignment I am looking at three-dimensional assessment and working with a critical development team, which I have the pleasure of doing in my district. So a critical development team that I work with, we have 2 high schools and a total of 6 science teachers in our district, 3 at each school. We have a counterpart at the other high school that teaches the exact same courses, and our pairs make up job-alike teams that we're able to look at instruction, assessment, and student achievement for our particular courses. So I would first like to introduce the concept of three-dimensional assessment for those that are not familiar with it. These assessments incorporate science and engineering practices, disciplinary core ideas, and the cross-cutting concepts that are found in the next generation science standards. And while it's not necessarily a brand new or novel concept, it is something that we have found is severely lacking in many of our science assessments. So if we take a minute to compare our traditional assessments with the three-dimensional assessments, we see that oftentimes traditional assessments focus on just those disciplinary core ideas rather than all 3 dimensions. Many are very long because they require many questions if we do want to get multiple dimensions into our assessment. And so it can be stressful or overwhelming for our students to have to answer that many questions. And a 3-dimensional assessment is an alternative that hopefully will help our students. The 3-dimensional assessments use less questions and organize them into tasks so that they engage the students to look at one scenario through all 3 dimensions rather than looking at separate scenarios for each dimension. In my district, we use Google Forms to give assessments, and lately they have been updating Google Forms, and we are now able to start looking at creating interactive components to our assessments so that we can get those science and engineering practices in with the other 2 dimensions. So now we are looking at where do we start? How do we keep our hours and hours of trying to digitize our assessments from going to waste? So the first step in redoing our assessments is basically to take it slow. We probably already have things in our assessments that can be used so that we don't have to start from scratch. So our first true step is to assess what we have. Then we want to start creating or modifying assessments that we have. So at first, we have to determine what we want to assess within the NGSS framework because that may not have been what the original test was based on. Then we need to brainstorm possible scenarios so that we can really truly understand what students know. We can do this in our pairs, which hopefully 2 brains are better than 1, and through that, build a task and create engaging questions for our students to show us what they know. I have an activity that I got from the KSD Impact Institute this summer, and it stems from the life science standards, the high school life science standards in NGSS, specifically the first performance expectation. In this activity, we evaluate 5 tasks and determine which of the dimensions are represented in each. Oftentimes, as educators, we think there are more dimensions represented in our assessments than our students really will get out of them. So, after we have gone through and assessed each of those, looking at whether they have 1, 2, or 3 dimensions and which of the dimensions they have, we can look at a good 3-dimensional example. And this example comes from STEM Teaching Tools, and it is an example that includes all 3 dimensions. It looks at 2 disciplinary core ideas, 2 science and engineering practices, and 2 cross-cutting concepts, and really shows what students know. I am lucky enough to work in a district that's data-driven and willing to make changes based on what we learn at various professional development opportunities. Since taking the course that I created this presentation for, I have had the opportunity to begin implementing 3-dimensional assessment in my school. While we are still very early in the process, we are excited about being able to not have to start over, basically. So we use many common assessments in our courses because we do have our Java-like teammate at the other high school. And we make tweaks to the assessments to fit our individual courses or our individual classes of the course. But we use Google Forms so that we can easily collaborate on assessments, we can modify, and then it does make grading quite a bit easier. As Google Forms has been updated, its capabilities have expanded, and we now have the opportunity to make the tests a bit more interactive. We can insert files, or even better, we can have students insert files to answer questions or solve problems within our Google form. On the right is a basic example that I created for my biology class. With the capabilities, we're able to divide tasks required to create three-dimensional assessments between me and my teaching partner. And since students can use that add file function, they are able to interact with Google Docs, Google Sheets, to graph things, to write about things, to make flowcharts, and then insert that into their form for us to grade. Collaboration has been a big part of our success in starting to implement this, because we have to build capacity for our students to be able to complete these kind of tasks. We can't just have it on our assessment and expect our students to know what they're supposed to do. So we hope that implementing this strategy will help our students perform well on the state assessments and MAP test, because many of those assessments use things like drag and drop, things like flowcharts that students have to be able to do. And so hopefully through our use of technology and our use of these more interactive assignments and assessments, we will be able to help our students be successful. So I thank you very much. Any feedback is appreciated, and have a good evening.